Rightio, welcome to the Culture Couch Live again, and to the boys, Emil and Jez. We've lost Woz for this week. Hopefully he'll be back with us next week. G'day, boys. How are you?
Where's Warren?
I think he's moving house, actually. So, which is probably the worst job in the world. I take my hat off to removalists. They are very, very valuable, those people. Yep. They do a fantastic job because moving is a really tough gig. And I got a great story about that, but that's for another time, boys.
We're doing it tomorrow. Look at that.
Oh, you are too. Yeah, you got the boxes. Yeah.
Boxes everywhere. What a pain in the ass.
Yep. We just finished ours, so we're feeling good.
Yeah, once you get in, it's good, isn't it? Once you sort of move house. But anyway, all right, boys. What's that?
What's this got to do with culture?
We're building relationships. We're forming bonds through things we dislike.
I'll tell you what it does. Do it breaks culture moving though.
I've got a real life example this morning, actually.
It can put you under pressure. Are you looking after yourself or are you looking after the team?
Mate.
Hey?
A shout out to my beautiful wife.
Yes, I'm shouting out to Liz as well.
All right. Okay, guys, first question's from Ruth. Ruth, every time we try to give feedback at work, it seems to turn into a joke. Any tips? I mean, guys, it's a great question because it's probably one of the most common things we see, isn't it? When we sort of start our real talk session, at the back end of our workshops, how many times does that happen? It pretty much, and Murph, you and I, as we've said, have worked a lot. I mean, I would have said 90% of the time over the last 3 months, you've always had the guys, hang on, let's stop. Let's take the humor out. But it is, when I say it's a natural part of the process, it does start like that just about every time, Jez, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's when you start with a male sporting team where you've got sort of, 30 to 40 blokes aged between 20 to 30, perhaps, in age, and you say to them for the next 2 hours, we're not going to make a joke.
Yeah.
They can't really speak for about the first 30 minutes because that's their normal mode of communication. So stripping it out is till you get used to having those conversations is really important, because if we fall into the trap of just making a joke and giving feedback as humor, then what happens is that no one really knows whether you're serious. If you're being sarcastic, people get offended. They don't tell you how they're really feeling. So you actually create a really an unsafe environment, which is the opposite of what you're trying to do. And to be honest, I've been a guilty offender of doing that in the past, and to the point where my team at one point said, this is the third time we've said this. Don't use humor to give us feedback. So we then made a team rule to ring fence any serious conversations. Excuse me, where we would say, okay, this is a serious. This is real talk.
Yeah.
We're just not going to have humor, and so then we would have the conversation. Then at the end of it, are we done? Yep, good. Okay, are we clear on our actions and how we're going to support each other? And then we could have a joke. We can say, well, that was pretty tough, or what it was. But so the rule that we would put in place is, ask yourself, is this the right time for a joke?
Yeah.
And if the answer's yes, then make the joke. Like, it's because we're not the fun police. We like having a great time. But if the answer's no, it actually isn't the right time for a joke, well, then just don't do it, because it stops the conversation getting to the level where you need to get to, and it wastes time, and someone has a joke on top of the joke, and so it just spreads out. So for a whole range of reasons, humor is like the best thing in the world, and Aussies are great at it, but keep asking yourself, is this the right time for a joke? And if the answer is yes, have it. If it's not, don't. But don't just fall into the habit of making the joke for the sake of making a joke. Even though it's easy and it's good fun, it stops us getting to the conversations we need to have.
I think I'll pick up on that point too, Jess. I mean, you mentioned habit, and it is a little bit cultural, isn't it? It's cultural, and it's become a habit. It's become very Australian, and we sort of tell a joke. But Emil, I mean, we talk about real talk as being a learned skill. Feedback is a learned skill. So don't necessarily worry about the joke, but put a stop to it, if that makes sense. So understand that that's probably going to be the start of the real talk sessions. It's going to start that way because it's a habit that's been formed over many, many, many years. But to Jez's point, put a framework around it. Otherwise, the most important thing about it is the feedback gets lost. When we don't want the feedback to get lost, and then we don't want to create an unsafe environment. So it is a learned skill, Emil, isn't it? So we have to make sure we put parameters around our feedback sessions.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I like the fact that we call it real talk training. Like it's a skill. So, I've been learning the drums again now that I'm settled, and I'm back into training, and I've lost, it's been funny because I was a bit handy there for a bit, nothing crazy good. But now that I'm going back, I'm actually sort of having to relearn it. So like any skill, you get to a certain point, and if you don't work that muscle or, those neural pathways, if you will, you can go back a little bit. So the reason why we built the Institute was to consistently practice real talk in a good, safe training environment where you can make mistakes, but you also know that you're in training. So the context is set. The challenge outside of the training sessions is, to Jez's point, setting the context in when you're playing sort of the game of business and not actually in a training session. So, calling it out that, hey, Jez, I'd like to have a real talk chat with you. Is 2:00 today good for you? We can then move into that knowing that it's serious conversation. We're going to talk about performance. We're going to talk about behavior, and we're going to eradicate the humor. So calling it out, setting the context becomes extremely important if you're not in a formal training session.
And I think it's also positive stuff too, isn't it, guys? So it's not, and I think that's part of the problem, because we see often real talk is the negative stuff, but we would always say, and the more you practice it, the better. So if you've got something positive to say, don't use humor for that either. So, but it's a little bit easier to deliver, isn't it, Jez? It's a bit easier to deliver that positive stuff, but still put a framework around it. So people are knowing you're giving serious feedback, whether it's positive or constructive.
Even receiving it. Like, how many times do you see someone get a compliment? Hey, Emil, thanks for doing that. And they actually make a joke about it. Like, instead of saying, hey, thanks, Jez, for noticing that I did that. Like, I did it with one of our team the other day. I said to him, mate, I really love the way you write and reply to my emails. And he thought I was, having a crack at it. And so he started laughing. I said, no, I'm serious. I said, you reply on time, they're thoughtful, they're articulate, and I can see where you're coming from. It makes my job so much easier. And he was a bit sort of, whoa. But the initial reaction was, make a joke and laugh it off. And that actually, I was being quite serious. The other point, which I think it's probably just as important, and perhaps even more in some ways, is that humor can be used to keep people in their place. As well. So it can be used as a really sharp bullying tool, and that's that sarcastic humor. Because the trouble with humor is that there's always someone at the end of it. Like, you very rarely you have a joke where you're laughing about the screen or the tree or the car. There's always normally someone at the end of it. So just be really careful that we aren't using humor to bully people, really, to be frank. And particularly as leaders, it's such a powerful tool to build culture and build relationships, but it's also equally as powerful to destroy people and keep them on the edge.
Particularly in a group session, isn't it? I mean, often we say, but Yeah, I know I spoke to Emil like that, but Emil didn't worry about it. Now, it mightn't necessarily affect Emil, but all the 10 people that are in the room with the three of us, are going to go, oh, wow, what about what Ruzi said to Emil? Like, and they're going to get affected by it as well.
Yeah.
You know, so if you get comments that you might be able to have with your best mate who's at work, don't have them in front of anyone else as well, because it really sets a bad example, doesn't it?
The other thing on that, because that's what I actually wrote. I just drew a little circle with the other person circled. Like, what if John's sitting there going, geez, I hope Emil doesn't do that to me, taking the mickey out of someone over here. But with the email example, Jez, if you are even able to do that in a group environment, now the rest of the group know in one conversation how you like your emails. So now that kind of dominoes as well. So it works both ways. So catching the good is so important, particularly in a remote workforce, because people can be left to their own devices thinking that what they're doing is wrong when actually it's right. So keep catching. We would consider that real talk is catching the good as well as leaning into that challenging conversation. It's one and the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, and we'd all agree, feedback is so important. So it's got to be done right time, right place, you know, and it's really, really important to creating a good culture. All right, boys, the next question from Tristan. We're in a growth period of our organisation and have a great culture. We're about to recruit some more people and are worried that might impact negatively on that culture. Any suggestions about recruitment and the onboarding process? Again, and probably, Murph, footy clubs have become really good at this, haven't they? Footy clubs have become really good at, I guess, getting their leaders, and it's probably not as easy necessarily at a corporate level, but I know when I was coaching Sydney, you know, we would talk to our leaders about our culture, and we would say, we're thinking of getting this particular player into our organisation, and we'd have a real conversation. And there were times when our players would say, no, we don't want that particular person coming into an organisation. But there were other times where if you've really got a strong culture, and Tristan sounds like that their culture is really good, you can potentially take a punt, but it is a punt, and you've got to be aware of the pitfalls and the potential of the damage that may create. But again, good question. Murph, suggestions from you?
Yeah, just be really clear on your values. So when you're recruiting people, recruit for character and train for talent. Like don't recruit for talent and train for character. Like if you do that, you as you say, you're running the risk. And if you bring in people that are talented but lack character or a team value, then the risk that you have is that they take other people with them, and slowly your culture starts to erode and diminish, and you end up in a place where you're not happy. So so understand your values, who you are, what you stand for, and then recruit against those. We're not saying don't recruit talented people, but line them up and make sure that you are continuing to build the weight of numbers towards the character or the values of the organization. And what you'll find is that you'll become far more productive because the people that you bring in are like-minded, and they're all committed to the values of the org. And then once you've got them in, make sure that you sit down and train them. So I know that in professional sporting clubs, the captain will drive to the airport often and pick up the new player who's just flying in from interstate, and bring them back to the club. But on the way home, have a chat from the airport to the club. Have a chat with them around what the values are. Talk them, give them a tour of the club. Sit down with them and the leaders and show them an edited video of what the values look like in action at the club, who we are. So you're not leaving it to chance, and that's vital, that when we induct, we don't just induct around the technical side of the business. Here's how you do your job. Here's the reporting process. Here's the Salesforce system. here's a report. Like that side of it will happen. We know that orgs induct like that, but so often, don't they, Emil? They'll leave the culture piece or the values piece to chance. So
Totally.
So give that as much emphasis, if not more, than the technical side of the business.
Yeah, it's a great point, Emil, too. I guess the other thing too, at the moment, there's a little bit of an opportunity, because if Tristan, if you have built a really good culture, and we talk about how culture travels, so that there's in all likelihood, the people that want to join you are probably pretty good people anyway. So you might have a good list. So do your research and use that to an advantage, that you have created a good, but it is a fine line too, isn't it, Emil? I mean, you can be floating along nicely, you can be got a great culture, and then suddenly you go from 50 staff to 70 staff, and you end up putting 15 people on that don't fit your culture. So there is a real danger, and it's really important to get it right.
Experience actually with Aussie X back in the day, where I remember walking downstairs and I'm like, it was just, place was packed, and I'm like, when did this happen? Thank God we had an extraordinary impact to put in filters. So a couple of things come up, and this is from a live experience of my own. Is we used to, and I recommend this to everyone, in your recruiting questions, when you're asking their questions, ask them, what does your value look like? And ask them to tell a story of what that value looks like. Because when you tell stories, people should speak in behavior. If the person then, if you can't see clearly what they're talking about, you can sort of gather that they're talking nonsense, because you can't see the story and you can't see the behavior connected to your values. So that's a bit of a red flag. But do the same thing with the reference. Not enough companies call references and say, hey, is this individual, do they display practicality, inclusivity, creativity, and honesty? And then ask them to share a story. And if they don't share stories again, then you know, okay, well, maybe not that. So that's the first thing, I think, before they enter your team. Then the second piece that comes in is have safeguards. Like, where are your checkpoints to understand whether the person's going to make, and I always just say, it's got to be a 3-month probationary period, most companies do. But what are the checkpoints that are saying, yeah, this person deserves to go past the 3 months? I remember there's that famous story, I think Van Halen, for the guys who used to set up their stages, they used to have these little attention to detail things where take out all the blue M&Ms from the packet and put them into the jar. And the company on the trial that did that, they knew their attention to detail was good. So what are your markers to know if that person will behave according to your culture? Because as Jez said, the technicality piece, they should be coming in anyway, depending on the level of the business, with the technical skills to do their job anyway. And if they've got a problem, I'll just ask a question. How they go about doing their job is what we're concerned about.
And I think it's also a case of, as you're getting bigger, don't forget what got you to where you were. I mean, how many companies then start to think about profit, not about people? So keep your focus on your people. You know, we're going to reward this, we're going to challenge this. We're going to reward this, we're going to challenge this. And it's the same thing we did when we were 10 people. It's the same thing we did when we were 15 people. Don't let it get away from you and think, oh, well, we're now making 10 million or 15 million a year, probably not as important. We've got to put this talented person on Murph and he'll boost our profits up. Because before you know it, you're going to look around and go, wow, how do we shift so dynamically from a really high performing culture to just a bunch of people that all they cared about was profit, you know, and we see that a bit, don't we?
Yeah, and I think your stomach is the best guide for that. Yeah. I know that sounds weird, but you get that feeling in your guts. It's like, this isn't quite right. And so at that point, don't just let it go. You've got to do something about it. Like it's a generally people go, yeah, I've actually known that for a while, but I didn't really know how to say it, or I couldn't work through it. I think Simon Sinek tells a really good story about appointing. We had the second session on Tuesday, and I think he told the story twice. Actually, he told it the first week as well. So, sorry, Simon. But it was about, I think it was Southwest Airlines. So they were appointing a senior official. Did you hear this? And they had the interview, and he was amazing. Like he was like the best candidate. Like blah blah blah.
Brilliant.
But then the CEO of Southwest Airlines then went and spoke to the receptionist, spoke to the check-in person, spoke to the ticket person as you walk onto the plane. And apparently he's just an arsehole to everybody else except for him. So he didn't get the job. But unless he'd gone away and checked that, and he must have had a feel, he must have had a thought to, to make him think to go and do all that checking. Unless he'd done that checking, they would have hired him. And it would have, again, it wouldn't have necessarily changed the culture straight away, but it just chips away because culture just changes bit by bit by bit by bit. And then you wake up and go, as you said, Ruzi, how the hell do we get here? Like, I mean, you've seen that in footy clubs, I'm sure.
Yeah, 100%. Particularly people of influence and significant influence, as you said, whether it's a CEO of a footy club, senior coach of a footy club, the sales manager, the general manager team or whatever. You don't have to get along wrong to take that culture the wrong way. Equally, get things right and continue to build on that. So, boys, fantastic advice again. Well done on the culture couch.